This article discusses Microsoft's plan to invest $80 billion in AI-enabled data centers during fiscal 2025. So this investment will primarily focus on building data centers to support AI model training and cloud-based AI applications. A significant portion of the funding will go towards centers in the U.S. Um, sorry, will go towards centers in the US. Microsoft President Brad Smith emphasized the potential for AI to drive economic growth in the US, linking it to the impact of electricity. The article also highlights the high cost of building AI data centers, which require advanced infrastructure like liquid cooling and high power capacities. Geez, talking today is hard.
We're both having trouble.
Yeah, Microsoft is obviously competing with other tech giants like AWS, Google, and Meta, who are also ramping up their investments in AI infrastructure to grow the growing demand, or to meet the growing demand for generative AI and other large language models. So, Eric, with this, if you got that through my stumbling, what are your thoughts on Microsoft's $80 billion investment in AI enabled data centers, and how do you think this will impact the cloud and AI services industry?
Well, I think it's going to certainly help, and it sounds like it's needed. It's fascinating to me, though, as you were talking, and we've talked about it, I think, in this podcast in the past as well. But just one of the most fascinating things about AI is the impact it's having on infrastructure, like IT infrastructure, and the demand it's placing on data centers, and also even just power grids throughout the world. I think it's really interesting to watch. I'll be curious to see how it long term, how it affects power consumption in data centers and that sort of thing. Because I think it's an exponential hockey stick growth sort of thing where, as more and more people start using AI and they expand their use of AI, like we were just talking about, that just puts more and more pressure on companies like Microsoft to be able to have the infrastructure to support it on the back end. So I think it's fascinating. I don't think it's good or bad necessarily. I mean, I guess it's good that Microsoft is investing in trying to keep up with soaring demand for computing power. But I think the next domino to fall potentially will be somewhere in the world. There's probably going to be some pressure on a power grid that maybe can't sustain, the consumption that comes along with that. And then, of course,
Yeah.
there's like the environmental thing too. Like, is there an environmental impact? I would assume there is if we're using more and more power and computing power to create this AI enabled stuff. How does that affect climate change and the environment, that sort of things? A lot to think about there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of unknowns that come with this as well. But with that, do you think that businesses like your business or other businesses should consider these investments when planning their own AI and cloud strategies?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think it's, I'm usually not an advocate or I'm usually not biased towards big technology companies. In fact, if I do have a bias, it might be against big technology companies oftentimes, because I like to see, I like to see innovation and people that have options in the market. And you never want to see like one big player sort of dominate everything, especially in the enterprise tech space where there's just so many good options out there. If you're looking for like an ERP or a CRM system or whatever. But in the case of AI and the scale that's required to make AI work, I think there's a pretty significant advantage that the big tech companies have, and rightfully so. Most startups couldn't invest what Microsoft just did in that data center and that computing power that they need. So I think not only in terms of financial resources, it's helpful because you need a company that can invest heavily in building out the infrastructure required to support AI. But also when you look at like the intelligence of AI, it thrives on information and learning. So a big company like Microsoft with that kind of scale is just going to have more data that it can draw from to teach AI models. So it's going to give an advantage to a company like Microsoft that has that sort of scale. So I think the big tech companies are at a pretty significant advantage, in my opinion, when it comes to all this.
Yeah, definitely. One question I have with this is, as Microsoft and other tech giants invest heavily in AI data centers, how do you anticipate this will affect digital transformation strategies for industries relying on legacy systems?
Well, I think in general, it's just going to put a lot of pressure on skills, which could be a good thing if you're a worker looking for work, or if you're just entering your career now, and if you're in technology and AI and data science in particular, those are really hot areas to be in right now. There's going to be soaring demand for those skills. But if you're an organization that is either a technology company that creates technology, or if you're a company that's going to deploy technology in their organizations, finding the skills, I think, is going to get harder and harder. I think the demand is just going to be so great, and the supply is probably not going to keep up. So good news for workers, and good news for college grads or people that are getting into their careers now. I'd highly recommend looking at technology, because I think there's going to be shortages in that area. But that's bad news for businesses that are trying to navigate all